Okay, next part I want to talk about was party politics.
Yeah.
And this is just a big, broad issue that has come to my attention in one of my classes I've been taking in university. And prior to chatting to you before recording this, my grudge was settled, and I realised that you're not victimised to party politics as of yet. But pretty much, Doug Van Bell, who wrote this book, and he's also my lecturer at university, he points out that, okay, he's in this book, he's trying to make politics simple for everyone to understand, and he uses a lot of pop culture and comic books and what have you, and it's a really interesting read. Anyway, he uses the example of New Zealand political system as being completely screwed up because of party politics and this whole list section and this idea that you've got to vote with party lines most of the time, unless you get a conscious vote like what will be coming up in the year to come, and the fact that it makes it hard for you to represent the people of Rotorua when National is expecting you to vote through party lines and what have you. And so do you think party politics is an issue?
I think it's very important we have parties in the New Zealand political system. Probably got to split apart a little bit of what you said. So the MMP system, which creates list MPs rather than constituent MPs, means there are MPs that maybe have different motivations, different reasons or different allegiances for being in Parliament. For me, I said in 2008, when it comes to voting, I will think about my electorate and my party, and then move forward from there. Having said that, I campaigned as a National Party candidate and as a National Party MP for my re-election last year, and therefore we very much set out what it is I stand for, what the party stands for, and the two go together. But there have been occasions for me when I've questioned policy and what it is we're going to do and what we're proposing. And I think there's probably other MPs that will do the same. And I, rather than grandstanding and screaming and yelling in public, have worked hard behind the scenes as part of the decision-making process of my party in Parliament to have an effect upon that. And there's something that we have before Parliament at the moment that I and my community feels quite strongly about, and I had indicated that I didn't feel I could support it, and we kept working and came to a compromise where there is greater debate in Parliament around this issue. So what often can happen and does happen behind the scenes you may not see in public, and it's always easy for people to say, well, you're just towing the party line and doing what they tell you. But if you're a member of Parliament, at least in the National Party, we're encouraged to, behind closed doors, challenge issues, discuss them, talk them through, and try and work them out. Human nature means we'll never ever agree about everything. But the good news for me is what I stand for, what my values are very closely aligned with that of the National Party, and there's always more in common with what we're doing than I have against, and therefore I found it easy, except on one occasion, to support the party line. Yeah.
Okay, so there are those areas for compromise and for you to go.
Yeah, there can be earlier, and then finally each MP decides how to cast their vote. Now, there's not been a single issue where I've thought I wanted to vote differently than the party that we haven't been able to work through. I'm not sure it's the same for all other parties. We've had an issue recently around same-sex marriage where a member of the Labour Party, William Seo, has been outspoken about his position on this. And he was attacked, I use the word gently, by some of his colleagues and hierarchy in his party not to talk about his issues here and what he thought. And this is a conscience vote, actually, not a party vote. And I don't think that in the National Party that same would happen to me, certainly not in public. And it questions for me, for other parties, how they take their approach to the individual issues and concerns that MPs will have. I'm elected by the people of Rotorua as a National Party MP, not as Todd McClay, the individual. It's a responsibility I take very seriously. On many occasions I stand up at my caucus and elsewhere and say, well, in my electorate it's different than that. This is what the effect will have on us. We need some special consideration here. And 9 times out of 10, when it's possible, we're able to work through those issues. So I take my responsibility on behalf of my electorate as a constituent MP extremely seriously, but I'm also a National Party MP.
Yeah, and in this book, Doug outlines 2 possibilities of combating it. party politics in New Zealand. That's one, having two legislative houses, so pretty much going back in time, having one house filled with electorate MPs and the other filled with the list MPs. Or he also says having pretty much a supplementary member voting system where it's not your seats in Parliament aren't related to your party percentage of party vote. So, do you have any comments on his ideas?
Well, it's always worth talking about. New Zealanders were given a choice at the election last year with a referendum over the electoral system they wanted, and they voted to keep MMP. And we're going through a process now where we're looking at how we change that system to make it fairer, more responsible, and more balanced. Not sure about the upper house. You'd need to be careful that the solution to the problem didn't create other problems of its own. You know, I think one of the most important things for me about being an MP is I am accountable to a group of people, and that's the people of the Rotorua electorate, whether they voted for me or not. I represent them all in the same way. It keeps you quite grounded to go out to community events or to I have my clinics on a Friday, and I can have 20 people come and tell me what's going on in their lives, what they think of legislation. It takes it away from the beltway that's Wellington, where it's just about the politics, and it allows me or forces me to think more deeply about the decisions of things I say in Parliament, my positions, because I'm answerable to a group of people in this electorate. I'm not sure all list MPs probably have the opportunity to experience the same thing or feel the same way, but New Zealanders have said they want to keep MMP and they want to keep list MPs, and so whilst I probably have a different opinion on that, I accept that this is what New Zealand have said in a referendum.
You make it work. Yeah. So I was going to come in here and I was going to say that you'd fallen victim to party politics.
Well, let's run through that and we can explain it.
We will. So back in 2008, in June 2008, you came on my school bus, which was the Mangamingi to Tukau Road bus route for Reparoa College. And you said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, that these school buses are running great and we won't change them, what have you. I was in the US come July, August, and I remember sitting around the dinner table at a Dodge City restaurant with my grandfather, mother and sister who came over to pick me up, and they said, "You'll never guess, we've lost our buses, we've got go buses." And that's where I was going to go after you said that these aren't going anywhere, these are fantastic buses. I come back to start school at the end of July and we've got these rubbish old go buses where the newest one is probably 10 years older than our old school bus, with all these drivers that came from big cities that didn't know how to drive on country roads. So it was quite a scare to start with, and it came with a lot of negative feedback and opinion pages across the Waikato and Bay of Plenty area. A lot of people sending their feedback and saying, we don't like these systems, we want our old buses. The legislation pretty much took a small business like was Reparoa Valley Transport, Nirvana Transport now. They took a small business that hired people to keep these buses going and had their own little workshop and took it up to Hamilton to work with go buses. And I now know that I'm wrong in accusing you because the legislation went through before the election, and I did try and find it over the last few days, but I was unsuccessful. So talk about that. So
that was before I was an MP as a candidate, and what happened was the school bus service in New Zealand is tendered. So the Ministry of Education puts out a tender, and companies can bid for runs or groups of runs, and they have a criteria to judge this and go through, and they award the tender. And at that time, the tenders had been given to a couple of larger companies throughout New Zealand, to the detriment of smaller, often locally owned and operated bus companies, and in Reparoa, Nirvana Coaches was a good example of that. So I got quite involved as a candidate when the owner of the company came to me, somebody I knew years ago, I used to play cricket with, Kevin Smith, and was, he was concerned about what was happening. And there wasn't legislation, because this is already in legislation. It was around the awarding of a contract, so the signing of a contract, and it's the Minister of Education that signs it upon recommendation of the Ministry, understanding that the Minister can't, look at every single contract to be issued in New Zealand. And so we were fighting a cause, and I was criticised fairly widely at the time for supporting local buses and saying that, you know, it was working locally, the community was happy, it wasn't just about the nuts and bolts of the cost, and that lives could be put at risk because Reparoa is a pretty difficult place to be driving buses in the winter. Sadly, before the election in 2008, the then Minister of the Labour government signed the contract. Once the contract was signed, it was almost impossible to reverse. I was hopeful the Minister wouldn't sign it, and Anne Tolley, who was our spokesperson at the time, wrote to the Minister asking for it not to be signed so close to the election. But it was unfortunately signed, and we probably spent another 2-year period looking closely at that. The Minister asked the Auditor General to do a full investigation of the tender process, and whilst it was found that there were some challenges with the process, they weren't manifest to the degree that the contracts should have been cancelled. So this is an independent body has looked at this, and it was their decision, and sadly it means that Nirvana Coaches now no longer is in existence and someone else is there. So had you know, I don't know what would have happened after the election when we were in government had the contract not have been signed, but what I do know would have happened is we would have had a very close look at this, and some of the decision would have been around, for me, supporting local communities and local economies.
Yeah.
You know, the kids are getting to school, and I guess the system's working, and in a year or two's time, a lot of those school kids won't remember the old bus and the old bus drivers, and some would argue that's progress. I don't. But it just goes to show you've got to be very cautious about messaging when you're a politician, because you know, the outcome of that and the reason for it probably were not sort of explained to you or passed on to you and others. And you could just see that about, you know, politicians saying one thing and doing another. I wish we had you know, the chance to have a different outcome there, because, as I said earlier, my father used to drive a school bus in Reparoa, and I know those areas. But others sometimes make decisions, and you know, you can't always fix everything you would like to.
It's very unfortunate when the party tries to do legislation close to the election that they wouldn't see the election results, but the new incoming government.
Yeah, we have some rules have been put in place, we in New Zealand, that says appointments shouldn't be made within a period of time of an election.
Yeah.
And other decisions shouldn't be taken or made in case there is a change. But, you know, probably the ministry and the minister of the time of the Labour government looked at this as a very normal process. They had been going through the tender process for more than a year, and that was their recommendation. Perhaps it shouldn't have been signed, however it was, and you know, not much we can do about it. I hope that when these contracts come up for tender again, as they must within a period of time, that we can consider good local companies again. I mean the ministry. The challenge will be that not all of them will still be there.
Yes, unfortunately.